from the New York Times. And it says it's about an app called Wordle, Word, like word, and then LE. Wordly, a viral once a day word guessing game created by a Brooklyn based engineer as a side project that has amassed 300,000 players in 2 months. The word game has gone from dozens of players to hundreds of thousands in a few months. Yeah, that's kind of how apps work, by the way, New York Times. I understand that seems impressive from a news publication's point of view, that you could go from dozens to hundreds of thousands in a few months. But that's pretty much how it works for apps. that's kind of how it goes. You make an app, that's generally what happens. And that's why media is in a real pickle, because news apps like Twitter are kicking their butt. And that's where people are getting their news. Anyway, that's kind of a separate rant. It says that the app was created by a software engineer in Brooklyn. Wow, what a fantastic first story for 2022, I got to say. Has anybody tried Wordle? Wordle. And why is the New York Times talking about a silly little app that essentially still nobody's ever heard of? 100,000 users for, a social app or a game app is incredibly small. So why are they even reporting this? Unless it's the editor's cousin, perhaps, who's started this app. I'm trying to, if anyone has any information. Well, the engineer who made it is somebody named Josh Wardle, hence the name Wordle, because his last name is spelled Wardle. So it's a twist on his own last name. And it says that he's a software engineer in Brooklyn who knew that his partner loved word games and created a guessing game for the two of them called Wordle. Just over 2 months after releasing it to the rest of the world, the once-a-day game has over 300,000 players. There you go. That's the top story today. Sounds like now you know why we didn't do news yesterday. It seems like the world is slowly coming out of the holidays. We've not yet really got into any substantial news. It's maybe tomorrow. If that's the top headline today, well, let's jump to number two. Number two is from CNBC, that Apple became the very first company in the world to reach a $3 trillion market cap, as its stock has hit $182 per share, tripling its valuation in less than 4 years. And that in itself is totally quite remarkable and worth discussing, because, welcome back, Chris Fornoff. You missed, Pat, Chris, I'm sorry to say, you missed the biggest story of the day, the first headline of 2022. But it's so big, let me repeat it. That
Tyler, I
Yeah.
beg to differ. The biggest headline for the new year was the Tesla's quarter 4 numbers, and I'd like to kind of announce that I won the competition for the guesstimate for the fourth quarter,
Okay.
and the whole spreadsheet is on my Twitter. I can share the link, and I won the competition, the global competition. Yes, my calculation were exact. So the number for the fourth quarter delivered
325,000.
no 308.6, and
Ah,
my number was 309.
okay.
Good day.
Well done. You beat my guess.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I beat so many guesses, not only yours. I mean, the whole list of the people who guessed,
Well, in fairness,
out of
Messi has
all of
yet to
them.
guess.
If you
Well,
remember, I beat Messi last time. So,
Okay.
Oh,
did,
we're
did,
getting in your
did you get a
toes here.
Tesla for the right guess though? Otherwise, what's the point?
no, I'm
Yeah.
getting a gift
She
from
gets
the.
internet
I'm okay.
points.
I'm getting first of all, I get the bragging rights. Second, I'm receiving a gift from the Tesla Taiwan Club head. They are mailing the gift to me, and
Are you
I'm
getting
gonna
a
go
kiss
to
from
the.
Elon Musk?
Hold on, Cheryl. Let me finish. So there is like a gift that is arriving from Taiwan Club's head. I'm gonna go to the Gigafactory opening and the Starship launch. So yes.
So
Get a
there.
kiss from
Hello.
him.
Good
That's
day.
not so shabby. Okay. So that is the big news coming out of Arum. The strangely, the top story today is really bizarre. That from the New York Times, that there's a new app called Wordle that's a once a day word guessing game, which has acquired 300,000 players in just 2 months. There it is.
Good
That's the
day.
top. Yeah, well, fantastic. So number two is that Apple has become the first company in the world to hit a $3 trillion market cap, meaning it's worth $3 trillion. That in itself is kind of interesting. What is perhaps even more interesting about that headline is that it was only 4 years ago that they were one of the very first to become a $1 trillion company, and it took them 30 some years to do that. And it only took them 4 years to go from 1 trillion to 3 trillion.
United States tax regimes are very kind to the corporations.
And Apple's not the only one in this race to 3 trillion. You've got the Google and the Facebook and the Microsoft and others all blowing past 1 trillion, going record pace into 2 trillion. And now we've got Apple first across the line at 3 trillion. And the question is, I mean, it was a kind of unconceivable thing only 10 years ago that companies would get to a trillion. And here we are talking
I,
about a company that just hit 3 trillion.
I think the first time I ever even heard the concept articulated was watching, was it Prometheus, like the Aliens movie? And that towards like the end, near one of the spoiler plot twist or whatever, they find out their ship isn't alone, and the guy's like, "Do you realize how much it cost to mount this mission to an alien planet? It cost $1 trillion for this entire spaceship program." And it's like, I think it's one of the first times I've actually heard like a dollar sign associated with like something cool in science fiction. And it's like, I can kind of see that. So if we're living on the Prometheus timeline, Apple can launch 3 of those aliens missions right now. So we should get on that. You know,
Yeah, it's
fill
fun.
up their stock so they can launch a better replacement for a new Ridley Scott movie.
Yeah. Okay. Third article. Washington Post. Investigation shows Facebook's role in spreading false narratives ahead of the January 6th riot. 650,000 posts questioned Biden's victory from November 3rd to January 6th. So somebody who put their analysts, somebody during the holiday break had a little extra time to use on a spreadsheet, it seems, and decided to do some number crunching.
Even when politicians have their lives affected and is physically threatened with stuff, if they're still relying on the platform for their reelection, they're not going to threaten it. That's the crazy thing about this. As long as they're saying, yes, we're going to spend all of our super PAC money on Facebook ads, it's like, oh yeah, but we don't want to like piss off Facebook by regulating too much. We just need to say, please don't basically send angry people, cosplayers to our capital.
So the article says, and Cheryl, if you wouldn't mind pinning them to the room, I'll pin it in Clubhouse. If you pin it in Twitter, oh, Cheryl just pinned it in Clubhouse. Thank you, Cheryl. It says Facebook groups topped 10,000 daily attacks on election before January 6th. Analysis shows review of millions of posts shows that Facebook played a role in spreading false narratives, and Facebook groups swelled with at least 650,000 posts attacking the legitimacy of Joe Biden's victory between Election Day and the January 6th siege of the U.S. Capitol, with many calling for executions or other political violence. An investigation by ProPublica and the Washington Post has found. The barrage, averaging at least 10,000 posts per day, a scale not reported previously, turned the groups into incubators for the baseless claims supporters of President Donald Trump voiced as they stormed the Capitol demanding he get a second term. Many posts portrayed Biden's election as the result of widespread fraud that required extraordinary action, including use of force to prevent the nation from falling into the hands of traitors. Okay, so they're adding a little.
I like how just randomly, I'm reading some headlines from this one where it's like, oh fuck, how do we miss this? An upcoming book reveals new details about the meeting between Mark Zuckerberg learned Russia had infiltrated Facebook. Okay, so this is kind of bullshit. I just, if you want to find like some actual interesting thing with Facebook, we've heard about this for years, but the more interesting stuff was if you search for Zuckerberg Hackathon Russia, there was a time frame where literally the big exciting thing was Zuckerberg coming to Russia because he's like, well, we want to get some of the best employees working at Facebook, and he met with the Kremlin, and the details of the meeting were a little bit, not talked about too much with things, but the people that were at the meeting said, yeah, so the biggest concern that we have is they're going to take all the best programmers away to America. And so we got them to agree to help us set up a local internet research group. It's all they're public, and so it's hilarious about this because uh, how this whole thing relationship has turned out over time. But the fact is that one of the concessions that Zuckerberg made when he was meeting with Kremlin folk, is to help them set up local talent groups just to make the thing work, specifically local HQ type kinds of operations. And the thing is then they said, maybe Facebook shouldn't be directly associated with this. And then people are fucking surprised when later on the whole thing gets weaponized. They went over and helped them set the thing up. And it's like, with all the journalism going on, it's really shocking how people don't like the most basic stuff. I think the only reason I remember this was because I was like paying attention during the time frame. I think everyone else is just on the yay, here's the tech stuff going on train or something. I don't know, but yeah, it's crazy, and they conveniently forget these meetings or these things, but there's still enough news headlines out there. If you search for 2004, 2006 timeline or so, there's some great stuff out there.
Mm.
See, let me see if I can find some of the articles sent you. They're great.
So I mean, the issue is there's no matter what Facebook does, it had Facebook taken down, this content, they would have been seen as silencing. Had they left it up, they're seen as promoting civil unrest, and they get caught in the middle of America's kind of bifurcated, polarized political landscape. They're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Oh, that ship sailed when they said we can be a force for democracy in the world, and please put us in your politics everywhere. That was literally the pitch for why they should basically not be under the same journalism requirements for like libel. That was literally the pitch. I helped make that with a lot of the tech company groups with things. So we had meetings with politicians. That was the original pitch. So saying, oh no, we find out that politics, you have to pick sides or whatever, that should sailed a long time ago.
So I've said this now for over a year, ever since Trump was banned, which was almost exactly a year ago now. I said, well, so that's fine. You can ban Trump. What happens if he runs again? And now a year later, it's looking more certain than ever that he will run again. And what happens if he wins? And he's still banned on Facebook and he's the president again. Given his track record for being a bit vindictive, he's got a bit of a vindictive streak. What happens to Facebook and Twitter if Trump becomes president again? And I've been saying that, like I said, for a year. And I think as time goes on, I think that seems more and more feasible. So I'm curious
Look at the anti-Trumpers. Look how he handled those with stuff essentially for political appointments. Look how essentially they went through and basically took anyone with any affiliation that seems that they may even be. It wasn't that was like not competent. It was just even having the hint of not basically becoming sycophantic. That they basically just purged essentially any of the government administrators that basically would actually just do their jobs unless they were like absolute loyal to the party. And this happens essentially, not pretty regularly, but like it is an event that happens in a lot of government administrations historically. One other thing we were talking about the vindictive part. I just want to bring this kind of separately with things, but people's like online public presence. This does have a thing when you take political positions. It's not even like in the current day, but whether or not it's like the status like 5, 10, 15 years from now, because politics do change and the how people pursue them changes, especially if you're in more politically sensitive areas. As an example, when tech platforms change their policies, like Clubhouse changed their policies on replays, historical things on this. And I would like people in the room to try this, by the way. If you search by your name publicly on Google or DuckDuckGo, search essentially on the third, fourth page, every Clubhouse room you have ever been in publicly appears with things. Even if you popped on the stage for 5 minutes or whatever, 15 minutes, every room you've ever been in, if you were in those shoot your shots rooms, if you were a Taiwanese dissident that basically popped up into some Chinese rooms or in the Sudanese rooms when they were talking about the other stuff, that's all public now and publicly linked permanently in essentially an online repository. And the fact that Clubhouse essentially did not get consent for that means people are probably in physical danger from that. But the fact is that these policies are being enacted without that consulting of like people that have political competence on that means that we're going to have random lists essentially being made of people, and that's too convenient for politicians to use historically. And I really think the tech field need to be more aware of how these things are used historically because it doesn't end well.
Hmm. Okay.
If you expressed anti-Trump views, there are permanent records of that everywhere, and that's fine as long as we are in a situation where it's all just angry words on the internet. But yeah, that can change, and I think people should be more cognizant of that.
Okay, that kind of relates to the next headline, which is, well, by the way, to finish the thought on what happens to Facebook and Twitter in the event that Trump runs and wins the next presidential election, which I don't think is in the realm of impossibility. So, especially with Biden, uh, I don't know that Biden will run again next time, which means it's not totally obvious who will run on the Democrat side. It's a little more obvious who runs on the Republican side. So, um, if he were to win, is there an executive order he could write that would put? By the way, India did something very interesting to Twitter when India wanted to punish Twitter. It essentially removed their platform protection, Section 230, making them legally responsible or for everything that gets said on the platform, which is a completely impossible situation for a platform like that to operate under, because you're going to be sued 10,000 times a day. You're responsible for every possible uh, stupid thing that every stupid person on the platform says, and you're talking potentially 1 million infringements per day. So that's, could Trump do an executive order type move? And by the way, he might not even need to, because it's very possible that the um, Congress might have a little bit of a right lean if he does win, and then they could run it through the Senate, and the Senate could approve that these platforms would lose their Section 230, and then it wouldn't even have to happen by executive order. Anyway, it just blows my mind that there could be some really crazy retaliation maneuver uh, in that scenario. So the next article, as I said, is somewhat related to the point that Chris was just making about people saying political things online. There was a VC by the name of Joe Lonsdale, who used to be in the Bay Area, is a co-founder of Palantir, moved over to Austin. And now the headline from TechCrunch is that Joe Lonsdale's tweets about woke tech diversity spark investor pushback. Last week, in response to someone who tweeted that VCs are racist, venture capitalist and entrepreneur Joe Lonsdale attributed disparities in venture capital investing to average Black culture. Quote, a real view. Average Black culture needs to step it up and stop having as many kids born out of wedlock, which is a statistical indicator of underperformance, who don't value education or spend as much time on homework, wrote Lonsdale in a now deleted series of tweets. The opining of Lonsdale, who co-founded Palantir and runs an early stage VC firm called 8VC, prompted swift criticism from a number of tech investors, many of whom called on Lonsdale's advisors and limited partners, meaning the people who give him money to be a VC. This is kind of like white collar canceling, essentially. When other VCs are calling on your LPs, or what are known limited partners, those are the people who give money to VCs. And so if fellow VCs start calling your LPs and saying, hey, did you see what the VC you gave money to said on Twitter? Yeah, that's just straight up canceling at the country club. So people called on the LPs, which include the likes of Yahoo founder Jerry Yang, Box CEO Aaron Levy, and actor Leonardo DiCaprio as some of his LPs, for example, to speak out against the entrepreneur's actions. In one tweet, with a screenshot of Lonsdale's tweets, Bessemer partner Elliot Robertson wrote, quote, it's not VCs like Joe Lonsdale that hold the tech ecosystem and society back. It's the hundreds of LPs, co-investors, founders, and decision makers that remain silent because they do not care, they are scared, or they agree. I feel bad for them to live like that, it's sad. So he's one of those VCs who are essentially doing a bit of white collar canceling there. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and trademark that term, white collar canceling. I've never heard anyone use it, and I'm claiming full rights to it. If you wish to use it, you can DM me, and I will make an NFT for you so you can use that term as well. So, Stealth Mode General partner Lolita Taub, who formerly invested in Backstage Capital and the Community Fund, told anyone who agrees with Lonsdale's racist commentary to unfollow her. Lightship Capital GP Brian Brackeen, meanwhile, said in a tweet that any LP of his is complicit, meaning anyone who gave Joe Lonsdale money is also complicit, and that there's no shame in being him in San Francisco. The culture there is to accept people like him. Diversity in tech can't improve until we diversify the geography, was the quote from Brian at Lightship Capital. Lonsdale responded to a request for further context, saying to TechCrunch via email that he was jumping on a flight, but that somebody edited a screenshot and took a tweet totally out of context in order to cause outrage. He further added that the people attacking me have political motivations. You will note they are almost entirely on the far left and prefer divisive attacks versus working towards positive solutions together. He insists that context surrounding the statements was lost from his original thread. Quote, I commented how past racism likely caused issues and some cultures today that we need to discuss and address, and given how terrible some of the things these communities experienced in the past were, like redlining and Jim Crow and so many terrible past issues, it isn't necessarily fair to blame 100% of problems today on racism. Lonsdale also added that he has, quote, invested millions of dollars in Black founders and in relevant philanthropic causes and proudly work with a lot of advisors from these communities, and we continue to do more to reach out to the talent from these backgrounds and to partner. As I have stated, it's not only dumb to discriminate, but if anything, if somebody comes from a tough background and still manages to succeed, that means they are likely to be resilient, which means they are even better founder to back. I am eager to continue to back talented Black founders. When asked about the Black founders that Lonsdale has invested in, a spokesperson for Lonsdale responded by saying it doesn't seem appropriate to list names and force anyone to answer questions given how Lonsdale's notes were taken out of context. Lonsdale has highly successful business track record, but a record too of troubled personal dealings. In addition to Palantir and 8VC, Lonsdale has co-founded a line of companies, including Adapar, OpenGov, Affinity, Eprius, Esper, Swisscale Bio, Resilience Bio, Heart, and Lit, which recently received $50 million investment from Tiger Global. He is the main character in a number of controversies, including a breakup with early investing partners and a high-profile lawsuit filed by former Stanford student that was later dropped. More recently, he called, quote, any man in an important position who takes 6 months of leave for a newborn is a loser. And that was, indeed, I remember when he tweeted that, and that also at that time caused a little bit of a brouhaha in the Twitter sphere. And Joe is not afraid of causing a ruckus in the Twitter sphere. So,
hey, and it got mentions of every single company he's ever been on with this. So I mean, like, is that really a net loss?
Well, it's, let's see. I'm trying to see. Oh, Alex, who's now an investor and who was a CEO at Reddit for kind of its golden age, says on Twitter, yet we don't see VCs condemning average white culture for the opioid epidemic in America. Interesting point that he has there. By the way, he's married to is it Serena Williams, I believe? One of the Williams sisters.
Side note: Sackler's essentially got their civil suit thrown out with things, so or that shielded them from liability stuff. So that's still in the works. Maybe it's going to be slow wheels of justice here, but Sackler family is responsible for a lot of the opioid stuff, and among others. But there's at least maybe a hint of maybe some justice occurring. I'm not holding out any hope on that one, but it's just a little side note on that one.
All right. So the next article is from The Verge. And let me pause to remind everyone that we're trying a new time zone today. And is that who I think it is? Is that Mr. Cal Patel? I want to know what Cal thinks of our new time zone here.
Hey, Cal.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, your microphone sounds fantastic. Did you get a new mic?
Does it?
Did you get a new mic for Christmas?
No. I asked Santa for it, but didn't arrive.
Supply chain
Give it
issues
a
at the North
call.
Pole. Yeah.
Yep, the elves are going on essentially for better labor working conditions, and DeSantis
Jesus.
campaigning as much.
That's fine.
The great elf resignation.
So good to see you back,
Whoa,
Cal. So
Chris.
we're trying a new time zone today, 30 minutes early, to try and balance out our friends in the east and our friends in the west. And I think both Cheryl and Chris like it. If anyone doesn't like it, let me know. But if everyone likes it, we'll stick to this new 30-minute early thing, and it works for me. And
For me, it's more the attribution
For me
parts.
as
With
well, I like this time.
for me,
yeah,
it's more the attribution parts and the replays and the fact that everything's permanently on the record forever. That's more the factor rather than time zones.
Hmm.
so the next article is from The Verge, and then we're going to get in. We've got about 10 more, and then we get into the tweets. And Cal's been doing a bunch of good tweets in the past 24
Tyler, I
hours.
shared the tweet for Tesla, and we
Let's talk.
also have to look at the numbers and the stock evaluation, what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
So Tesla delivered 936,000 electric vehicles in 2021, nearly a million, and that's a lot of cars. That's a hell
Yep.
of a
The
lot of
company
EVs.
is so highly leveraged that if there's even the slightest miss in those numbers, it causes chain reaction hell.
Yeah, but everybody was like, oh, there's shortage, there's supply chain issue, and everybody was underestimating, not predicting the numbers as
Yeah,
they are
yeah.
out of the park. It's like the whole year production number of Porsche compared to the fourth quarter of Tesla.
But Tesla is an entirely different thing. They're doing electric vehicles, which means they only have 6 parts or so in their supply chain. And those parts have subcomponents and assemblies, but it's
Yes, so it
very,
is
very
a
different.
different thing. It
But
needs to be identified as a different animal. That's
they
what my
also
point is. Don't evaluate Tesla as a normal stock or a normal company.
they also have extreme amounts of obsession with vertical integration, very
Yep.
much borrowed from the SpaceX type kind of thing, or I think it was vice versa. Uh, but the thing is that vertical integration means everything's in house.
Yes.
Other car
Everything in
companies
house.
other car companies went for the other side where they say we want to make Wall Street happy. And one of the ways you make Wall Street happy is you have all these ratios you can optimize for. One of which is essentially profits to earnings, but there's other ones that you can basically use for your Six Sigma magic. One of them is that you can basically remove all of your on-site inventory for just-in-time optimization. You can also spin off all essentially the things that are cost centers. Like maybe we shouldn't manufacture this all in one facility. Maybe we should spread them out as many places as possible. Maybe we shouldn't own all those places. Maybe we should have like
Well,
ginormous
as
networks of suppliers.
I've been saying, we need to recognize Tesla is way ahead of its game. I've been saying this all along. Everybody's trying to play catch up. Everybody was trying to estimate, guesstimate, or downplay how the rest of the world is getting if affected by the supply chain issues, shortages, and all that, and how the stock have been under evaluated, and the numbers were also there was so much confusion around the numbers projection, but as you can see, that the fourth quarter, the numbers are astounding, and that proves something. It's not the number of production, it's number of actual delivery of the cars throughout the globe. And Chinese numbers were also out of the world, like 70,000 plus
If they
cars in
make
Wait,
China
what
only in
game
the fourth
is
quarter.
Tesla ahead of?
And also the fact that I won the number projection. That is the
this is
most
the most
important
important
part.
part.
Most important part is that I won the number projection and the global contest. The actual number is 308.6 and my projection was 309. And that is the most important part. Thank you.
Now you can do that game with things, but if it's any of the analysts play that game and they miss the number, or Tesla's groups misses it, or the bankers do, then they lose a lot of money. So that's one of the factors there.
While we're on the
So
topic,
Aram,
I don't
you're
necessarily.
pumping Tesla. Aram, are you buying Tesla? No,
I don't
just
have to
asking. Are
No,
pump.
you?
he just got an
I
engagement
don't have to
ring in
pump
Funza.
Tesla at all because it does its own
It
work.
does.
The
It
proof
pumps
is in the
itself.
pudding. I don't have to do anything.
No, I
Well,
get
I
I
that.
have a
have
I
fan
get
done.
bro.
that.
And
Actually,
I get.
I have
Elon,
done what I was
Elon
supposed to
pumps
do
it.
long time ago, which was like years ago, identifying what Tesla actually is. Yes, that
Is
was
this
way,
financial advice?
No,
not at all.
I get that. But can I get past
go ahead, Cal.
the pump just a little bit? A couple of things on that. Oh, absolutely. I've been very lucky to be a Tesla shareholder ever since I was at Vantage Point, and Vantage Point were the probably the only venture investors that they took money from reluctantly, or Elon took money from. And when I joined, I ended up with being a partner in the fund. Ended up with pre-IPO stock. So I appreciate what you're saying about the Tesla stock, and it's been quite good to me. What I would say is there are some things you have to look at based on current valuation. One is, and you know, the China numbers can look good, but you have to think about China 5 years, 10 years, because the entire valuation is based on numbers that'll come out 5 years from now. The second thing is, Aaron, where you really are totally, I mean, I totally agree with you, is that it is not just a car company. It's literally got an installed base of data sets. Thinking about it another way, right? It's got an installed base of uh, cars on the road, vehicles or devices on the road. I'm just using different language here. Devices on the road collecting data, which is allowing them to create data sets on how people are behaving and how, and so they're creating these, I think Chris will know a lot about these, the neural nets that is actually, the neural nets are getting filled up with lots of data
I've talked
based
to
on
people on that
everyone
team
using
and
it.
heading it up.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, I don't know what the valuation of that is. I don't think you can even value it
You can.
with what you would do with that data, right?
The
Exactly.
Tesla
It's
bot
not
could be
about
valued
data
as
only.
much as the car company.
Yeah, the data is 10 years from now. It's not even from today. The real value won't be seen for a long time, which is good for Tesla.
The
Cal,
other thing is you're legally allowed to use it, which will be interesting because right now, essentially, like I've been in rooms where we were looking at navigation technology stuff. We were doing it for we were looking at millimeter precision for like putting wearables in everyone's heads so they could scan the local environment and do navigation for people for accessibility reasons. But we were, as part of that, we were in the room with a lot of groups where they're saying, for this was something that it was a collective realization by a lot of augmented reality startups and VCs, is we started to realize that we're building these advanced technologies that we need a mapping layer. Like it's not just about, but hey, I can put an elephant in the room or I could put something cool on your desk. If you don't have the spatial understanding or awareness of the world around you and your position in it, then it dramatically limits some of the more exciting utilities of being able to connect everything together. What's interesting about this is that essentially when they're looking at how to invest in the sector, the VCs were basically asking, they're doing like a little community poll essentially, go and they put everyone in a room and say, should we invest in like a few smaller I'm sorry, should we invest in just a smaller number of much larger companies just so we can basically build this common mapping layer? Should we just back essentially technologies that get sold to one of the tech giants? Should we just do a bunch of little ones? Everyone was very sore about that at the time because they were like, well, we gave Series A's and to all these little VR startups with things, so they didn't follow them up with Series B in time for the consumer market. So we were a little sore about that, so we kind of advised against that strategy. But what's interesting about that specifically is a lot of the work there for the augmented reality stuff was very much focused on saying, well, what do we need for this common mapping layer? And they had representatives there from Google, they had ones from Apple, and there was a lot of discussion about who should own that data. Is this something essentially we're going to basically all throw in together? Should we build the same way we built the maps that we built for from the satellite imagery that we licensed, and then should we have like more of a community part where people are physically adding the building themselves? Should be device be own? These were open questions. But what's interesting about it is some groups aren't waiting to basically ask how what to do. They're just physically putting the devices in the world, just building those data sets. Where you're going to see this actually come into play is when the government basically needs to decide essentially who owns the data and whether or not essentially if someone scans it, if they can own it, the data that comes from that, or if that's basically part of the legal right of the people that own the physical real estate for it. That's going to be an open question. I suspect that we're going to find those questions in very contentious in the near future, as these independent data sets are going to have extreme value attached to them in the near future when they start revealing
Yeah,
the outcomes when we
Chris,
inject AIs
on
on them
top
and
of that,
stuff.
the data, there's such a good point on the data in different countries. So back to the themes that we've
Yes.
been discussing in tech news around the world, right? The Chinese are not going to allow that data to be used in the same way. They're going to want that data back, or not even allow them to collect it in the first place,
Or not let us leave the
and
country
process
with
it,
local
right?
data centers.
And India, which I think is going to be a big market for Tesla once the Chinese are done with Tesla. I still have that hypothesis.
well,
But yeah, it's
Cal,
interesting. Well,
you can't.
So the data aside,
The question is who
my
owns.
point is in terms of technology. Sorry about that. I just wanted to finish my point. That was if you disregard the data aspect, you disregard everything else that Tesla is doing and has the vision for, which I've been talking about since the past 7 years now. it's not only about data, it's not only about one thing, it's about the vision. The fact that my car was able to update yesterday, and since it was built, and now what it has become since yesterday, is showing me right and left, camera, rear view. It's showing me so many things, just like updating like a computer. Which other car company has that kind of a vision
That
or
is the data.
capability?
That is the data,
Hold
right?
on.
So
Yes,
I mean, the
no, no,
data,
but
it's
the
integrated. The
capacity
data
to
and the
update a
hardware.
product,
That they've stopped using the
capacity.
lidar and the radar. They're using the camera more, right? Which is what you're saying. They're collecting the camera data, and then they're using the data sets
They
from there.
don't.
So it's kind of a total
They don't use the
integration. They're
radar.
even in developing their own chips, so they can working it all the full stack. So I just say, I'm just elaborating that it's all linked. It's like one big. It's not separate from the data.
Okay.
I,
So
I don't.
Yeah.
speaking, Cal, you found a humdinger of an article because the UK is reporting on it first out of the BBC that Tesla is being criticized. According to the BBC, I've got the article right here. I can't really believe this one. This almost is kind of blowing my mind. I'm sharing it at the top of Clubhouse. Hopefully, Cheryl can pin it to the top of the Twitter space. And for those who don't know, we are in both apps simultaneously. I'm in speaking
Yep.
from the stage on both apps simultaneously. Cal is speaking on the stage, and well, he was in Clubhouse, and then he jumped over
I'm
to
flipping
Twitter.
around.
He
I'm
jumped
flipping
over to
around to
Twitter
see how.
space.
He's
Yeah.
teleporting.
He's
He's crossing the
teleporting
streams.
between apps, and there's speakers on stages in both apps and separate audiences in both apps, and we can all hear each other, and that's kind of the magic of being in 2022 now. And the article that Cal found, great find by the way, Cal, is I pinned it to the top of Clubhouse. If Cheryl could pin it to the top of Twitter, or Cal, if you could share it to the top of Twitter, it says from the BBC: Tesla criticized after opening a Tesla showroom in the Xinjiang province. Electric car maker Tesla has been criticized in the U.S. after opening a showroom in China's controversial Xinjiang region. The company, headed by billionaire Elon Musk, opened a showroom in the city of Urumqi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, on New Year's Eve. However, the move has been welcomed by some in China. And this is where we can get our
They
little.
use cotton there, all the cotton essentially for making the Tesla shop, right?
Oh my Jesus. So hold that thought. It says China has been accused of slavery and genocide against Uyghur minority groups in the resource rich western region of the country. Republican Senator Marco Rubio, who sponsored a bill signed into law by President Joe Biden in December that requires firms to prove that goods imported from Xinjiang were not produced with forced labor, spoke out against Tesla's decision. Mr. Rubio tweeted, "Nationalist corporations are helping the Chinese Communist Party cover up genocide and slave labor in the region." Scott Paul, the president of the Alliance of American Manufacturing Industry body, said, "I'll be blunt, any company doing business in Xinjiang is complicit in the cultural genocide taking place there, but Tesla's actions are especially despicable." Tesla did not immediately reply to a request for a comment from the BBC. The BBC is not responsible for the content of external sites, meaning Twitter. However, the opening of the new Tesla showroom was widely welcomed by users of China's Twitter-like Weibo social media platform. One user posted, "Thank you for expanding in Xinjiang. Happy New Year." Another said, "You see, Tesla supports the development and construction of Xinjiang, unlike some companies." And they could be talking about lots of companies because there's been quite a few companies in recent weeks who've withdrawn from doing business in the region. And who've said we can no longer work with suppliers in the region, very notably Intel and Walmart, both in the past few weeks, and
Some
H&M.
terrible things for their social credit store.
Right. So, and this caused big backlashes in China. So it's not a surprise to see that when a company does the opposite and actually goes into Xinjiang, that it's met with a lot of fanfare. But I think it's not unreasonable to question the legitimacy of the people applauding it because there's a lot of astroturfing that can be done, and these could be government-backed supporters who are
Elon Musk is playing a dangerous game, though, if he's
Right.
basically saying, "Hey, I want to basically do deals with China because it's going to basically really help my stock when I was getting hammered domestically. This will basically make the long term valuations great. I can become world's first trillionaire with stuff. This will be great. Um, on the other hand, when you built a lot of that on U.S. government handouts, specifically for ones tied to top secret military projects that are basically stealth funding a lot of your space endeavors, that historically been tied to everything from nukes to long range territorial controls. Like that's where a lot of these treaties started with. And all of a sudden, we're starting to get a little unhappy with each other with China and USA. And you say, no, 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 I can make money off of both sides. That's a really risky position to take. It'd be interesting to see how he navigates that. I mean, when you're that wealthy, you can buy off senators and lobbying firms and pull in all sorts of favors. But it's definitely a risky game to play politically. We'll see how
Right.
he handles that.
Why would Tesla at this point do something that's so unconventional? That's a very unconventional move. It's very peculiar. I would love to hear Cal's best guess as to why this is happening. I think it would be reasonable for somebody to assume that in that it was not necessarily Elon's idea, that he might be being, I don't want to say forced, but coerced into making this move by, and in Cal's there's
Yeah, I get that. Here's yeah, Tyler. The way I would look at this is he's in negotiation with the Chinese government.
Right.
Listen, I was in negotiation with the
That's
Chinese
why I
government.
said it would be amazing to hear your take on this. Yeah.
So from a small kind of relatively smaller position of bringing a big retailer to China, several years ago, and then exiting it, right, and then explicitly deciding to exit China, with our investments, other than the buying, we had a $5 billion buying business, which we bought from China. We bought goods from China, which is fine, which is great. But we bought a retail business there, and then we also I'm talking about Best Buy, and then we also set up a whole bunch of stores, right? So, and then we exited, one of the first retailers to exit, and I made that, I pushed that decision with the board and made that decision. In fact, the founder of Best Buy was kind of reluctant. He wanted Best Buys all over China at the time. He was feeling quite proud of the fact that these would be out there. But the 5-year plan and our day-to-day negotiation I was doing with MOFCOM and with the Chinese government. And on that basis, it's kind of a negotiation. You have to make a deal with the Chinese government. You have to make a deal for the next 5 years, 10 years. And we're small players compared to where Tesla has got to with the technologies that they have. And Apple is at right now. And Starbucks has been there as well. And Nike's been there. And I've talked to all these guys who run their Chinese businesses and other things. It's literally a negotiation at a point in time. So my hypothesis, not knowing insider information in Tesla, no insider information here, is that I imagine that there is a very complex, multidimensional negotiation going on with the Chinese. And It's Tesla, and then the US government, and then the different parties. And then because we've also got, SpaceX, and you've got different, and Tesla's a complicated animal with Elon all over this thing, to Chris's point. And I think it's just part of a negotiation. So the headline is the headline. But why would any rational company do this just before Christmas and get a headline out like this, unless the headline is specifically directed and brought out as part of this overall negotiation? So yeah, it's going to be good to watch this year. I think it's going to be a year's worth of watching this negotiation.
Can I add some context to what Tyler had to say?
Of why, but
ladies,
Sorry.
Wait, Vinay, who was that?
Well,
it's Iram. It's Iram.
I have a little bit of understanding why and the thought process behind this decision, and it has nothing to do with politics. But I'm going to reserve that thought for now and share later.
Okay, Vinay, you want to jump?
Yeah, so to what Cal was doing in China, I was also doing years ago, working specifically, and Cal knows this, the American Chamber of Commerce, which is all over China. And they've been in the last, I can just share some, I won't say complete insider information, but I can give you some data that the American Chamber of Commerce in China has been under tremendous pressure in 2019 and 2020 to expand American companies' footprint and investments within China into provinces like Xinjiang. And That's one reason why Apple, for example, was against a bill in the US that prevented, that was some senators were looking at to stop sourcing products from Xinjiang province. They were initially very against it because it would affect some of their negotiations within China. So there's a whole bunch of behind the scenes work as to when Tesla goes in. There's prerequisites and say you've got to be in X number of places, you've got to open X number of showrooms in these provinces if you want to operate here. So it's part of that larger. It's not just a random thing. Because as Cal said, it's part of a larger negotiation strategy.
Yeah,
Part of another context historically, and this is not well studied in business history or just in history in general with things, but there's plenty of documentation for this. Even when countries are at outright war with each other, like World War II, World War One, countries will sell to both sides. Where it's a little bit crazy is when you have countries that are actually fighting with each other and then have internal groups selling and trading with each other while this is going on. During World War II, IBM, Coca-Cola, Ford, Standard Oil, the list goes on and on and on. We're actively selling groups. They're actively selling soft drinks, processing equipment, information equipment, the fuel that essentially flew in the planes to the Nazis. Essentially, they go through essentially a train going through Argentina and neutral countries with Switzerland and such. And the thing is that there were very wealthy businessmen behind this that made a fortune. And even after the war, they were able to recoup many of those investments and basically say, oh, well, that was just a spinoff division. We didn't have active control over the operations, despite a lot of things being different. And oh, by the way, I donated to your campaign. Please don't look into this. And so, if there are countries historically that have been in the outright some of the worst wars in human history, and they're fine trading with each other, and somehow everyone kind of looks the other way afterwards, we're not at war with China. We're very unhappy with them, and they're very unhappy at us. And there's some horrifying things happening, but the fact is that I don't see this as being a historical anomaly. In fact, essentially, there's a very strong precedent for bizarre things happening with what businessmen were able to get away with things, regardless of what the political situation is.
yeah. Okay, it's. I guess we're going to hear. I mean, because this is breaking kind of news. Honestly, it's like the Guardian just reported it an hour ago, and strangely, the UK press is on top of it. I guess because America is just waking up right now, and this is a very American. The American media.
Verge had it.
Yeah, they're going to jump all over it in the next few hours. There's going to be a huge talking point today as everyone wakes up across the U.S. So, but I think Cal and Vinay are right on, actually. But we'll find out. And no, Elon's going to have to make a comment. People aren't going to rest until
He also dissolved. He dissolved the press department. This is something that they were actually, the journalists were asking for quotes from the American side, and they said he dissolved the press department in 2019. That's an important point on this one for time delays. He needs time to talk to people.
Yeah. So the next article is, as Cheryl had pinned it previously. Sorry, Cheryl. It was circling back to the Verge article that TCL, which makes probably the best value TV screens anywhere, unveils a second generation smart sunglasses called NextWear Air, wearable secondary display with two 1080p OLED screens inside of a pair of what look like ordinary sunglasses. No AR VR features and lighter design coming Q1 with pricing to be determined. They're 30% lighter and come with swappable magnetic front plates. TCL is preparing to launch a second iteration of their wearable displays. Again, look just like sunglasses. You slap them on, and now you've got you connect them via Bluetooth ostensibly to your iPad, and you can sit in Starbucks and have a full field of view, like you're sitting in front of a 60-inch monitor at Starbucks. I love it. I think that's what a brilliant use case where you can make even much thinner. Maybe you tap into your phone with it, and the combination of this with Google Assistant and getting work done on a mobile device now seems pretty appealing, I gotta say.
The
And,
tech is there for the physical displays. One of the things is that the spatial tracking is a little more tracking to do, and a lot of companies have just gone, frack it. We can make enough money as a display just to basically make a smaller one. We can get the form factor, we can hit the other targets. Someone else figure out the software sensors. We don't care about this. And they're honestly with things, if you know what you're doing, a lot of contexts don't require a lot of that stuff. So you can validate a lot of the use cases of does having constant information accessible at any time within your field of view without having to manipulate a physical device that you're holding, is that useful, and are people willing to pay for that? And because honestly, that's something that augmented reality has never proven is the business case. That's never basically, outside of like some specialty niches, not enough to support a larger consumer market. So if they're able to validate that part, then hell, that basically provides a template for all the other guys. They're doing all the crazy sensors and everything, saying, "Oh, Apple's going to launch the AR glasses next year, or this year, or next quarter," and you will see those headlines every single freaking quarter when they're saying, "Oh, this is the quarter they're going to do it," or "Next quarter is the one they're going to do it." And they've been having that for 3 years, and it's kind of a joke because everyone takes them seriously on the timelines, which is hilarious. But yeah,
so
this is great.
it says it simulates a 140-inch screen from 13 feet away. The lenses are opaque, and the glasses don't offer AR or VR functionality. Instead, it acts as a secondary display that you wear on your face. Using USB-C to connect to a compatible phone, tablet, or laptop, stereo speakers built in. You can also connect via Bluetooth. This year's model also comes with two magnetic interchangeable plates that attach to the front of the frames to change up the style of the glasses. And the pricing here says in sale limited run at about $900, or sorry,
Ooh, it's a little
600.
high.
That's Australia, so it'd be
Oh,
600.
I like the magnetic part. So that means you can change the look with your outfit.
Yep,
Yeah.
that found that was a crucial part for
The,
deal with this
the
perspective
problem is,
stuff.
Tyler,
Mm.
I looked at these when they announced the first version, and I'm looking back on some of the reviews. They're almost unwearable. Wearable display was one headline from Digital Trends. They weren't really well received at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's
If you
unfortunate
look at
because
some of the
there's a
ones on
version of
reviews,
this.
so I don't know. Maybe they fixed a lot of it with the two
There's a version
versions,
of this
but
where that's a pretty good smart thing
not
for a
exactly a
display
winning
manufacturer to be
product.
doing.
Would you
So
say,
it
Chris?
sounds like there's a target they can hit there, but they need to hit like below like 400, 500, maybe tops with stuff. They can probably, if they can hit 300, they're going to have a winner. But the problem is that price point is too high for a lot of the applications that they would basically be the most useful for. If they just had
Yeah,
something that's a little
I
bit
mean
lower
the
res,
issue is the execution, right? It's like,
yeah.
are they comfortable? Are they? Can you wear them for hours? And all the reviews said no. So I don't
Well,
know.
it's very unfortunate,
It's
especially
like,
for a
okay,
display
So
are they
manufacturer,
for the
because
Apple glasses?
there
what
is
is
a
the
target there
weight
for a market.
difference? What is the weight difference between the other one that we were discussing a couple of weeks ago? They were really heavy and causes headache. And what is the weight difference? I want to know because lighter is better sometimes.
It's also not. It's also the weight is important, but it's more how it's distributed on the head. One of the things you'll notice for a lot of the more recent augmented reality and virtual reality headsets is they shift weight to the back side of the display, so around like the around the back. And what that does, it basically evenly positions the weight on the neck, so the muscles essentially don't have to basically be fighting essentially for balancing on the spine. And that's actually really, really important. It's not necessarily the weight itself; it's how it's distributed. So one of the ways that some of the more groups have been doing this for a little bit longer, what they'll do is instead of making like the glasses like sit on the ear, what they'll do is they'll have it like wrap around the back to be more of a band, and they'll put all the batteries and stuff on the back side of it to compensate for the weight of the optics on the front. And so if you're careful about how you do it, you can actually have relatively heavy headsets that are very comfortable to wear. It's just making sure that thing is tuned. And that requires ergonomics and a lot of user feedback study. There's also a field called was it anthropomorphics or anthropotics, or I don't know what I don't remember the exact name.
Yes, Chris,
But
but this one does not seem to have the back strap
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
for
But,
the
but
occipital region. So wouldn't it shift the weight towards your nostril, your,
probably. But
temporal region and your, area above the ear, which is highly sensitive, for me, and it causes headaches. So I wonder how the technology in these glasses are shifted, like the weight wise. Um, if there is a comparison, I would like to know more.
Let me
well,
read this review from Engadget real fast. The reviewer reviewed the previous versions of the glasses, which he didn't really like, and now he says that these new ones, because they're called, the previous one was called TCL Nextwear G. This version is called Nextwear Air. Gee, I wonder where they got the concept of calling it, Air, like Apple, MacBook Air. It takes many of the same components from the first one, but has managed to shave off around, well, it says a third, but actually closer to about half of the weight. The previous ones were 130 grams. These ones are 75 grams and look to be a lot more stylish than the first model, including interchangeable fascias to customize glasses to your style as much as and he seems to think they're off to a good start with these, so that maybe the next generation could actually be a game changer for folks who want to have a massive field of view in their pocket that they could, ostensibly use as a replacement for a large monitor.
Two quick things on there. One of the things that you need to have when you're basically doing stuff for wearables, it's a little different from other fields. And tech companies historically do not have very strong, outside of the larger corporations, do not have a very strong tradition of this. When Microsoft was designing the Xbox 360 controller and the redesign of it as well, they spent over $1 billion, is what they claim publicly, on R&D money for this to create something that looks almost the exact same. But one of the things that was a part of that research was basically getting detailed measuring exercises where they would basically take 1,000 people and measure all the variations of different age ranges, demographics, regions, disabilities, etc. And they would create detailed statistics of exact ranges of motion, exact amounts of muscle inputs, exact amounts of the ways that the fingers can evolve over time. And the thing is that seems like a lot of overkill, but it's very important because it means that you can hit with each one of your design targets. You can make sure that it works not just for some of your users, but for all of them. Whenever a journalist or someone picks up and saying, does this work for me for a wearable? You're going to get not a random distribution, but you're going to get something that basically can be crafted. And if you have something that only works for a small percentage of the people that pick the thing up, you're going to get the distribution of ratings where it's like, well, it works great for me. Why does it work for you? And that's part of the research that historically is very expensive. However, once those data sets are generated, you can use those across your entire product line, across all your consumer products and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that you're going to see display manufacturers when they start realizing this. You're going to see them start hiring more ergonomics type kind of people, more people that basically do like fashion design and such, because they have to pay attention to that stuff. And these are not historical competencies for tech companies. But what's
Yeah.
was really smart about this is that as those glasses manufacturers for a display manufacturer, this is great because a display being made a part of a larger consumer product, they don't necessarily control the entire vertical chain there. With something like glasses, they can theoretically control every last aspect of the display manufacturing and other parts. And if they only need a bare minimum of the software to do that, then hell, they'd love to get into that because there's only so much money you can make from the smart TV selling the data to the other tech companies. If you can basically get people using your glasses on a regular basis, that means you can establish a foothold that with the physical hardware, don't pay the Apple tax, and you can start actually making your way into new type of things. So I think it's very smart for them to be doing stuff in the space. They're going to have to build up competence real quick because they've got a lot of competition in there. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and the difference between the distance from your temporal, like your nasal bridge to your temporal area is very crucial. Sorry, my puppy. Because of the length, how long you can wear a glass, and how it affects your vision and the comfort level and muscular tension. Because if that's the difference between a good quality glass frame and like a mediocre glass quality frame, because the tension of these muscles around your eye and your forehead depends on how good the fitting is. So if they could customize these glasses based on the measurement of people's face, that would be optimum. But that's why the price point goes up.
Yeah, I also think there's a huge market on the lower end of the spectrum with things. A lot of display manufacturers, though, are so used to basically saying, look, it's a big screen. You can wear it on your face. And look, essentially, early adopters want to spend a lot of money on like the earliest things we use it to subsidize layer stuff. And I get the appeal of that, and it's fun and sexy to show off at CES if people end up going. But the thing is that there is a lower price segment that is a lot more interesting. Like, in like, especially in developing markets like India or other places where you have an enormous user base that basically has not made like platform decisions or loyalty decisions where you have like kids playing Fortnite for the first time and it's like the cell phones in the village type kind of thing, and you suddenly have billions of people coming online to the internet. I think those growth rates have dramatically slowed right now for going, hey, we're on the internet. But saying higher end applications like AR VR, there is still an entirely unwritten story or unwritten book essentially to be written on what that looks like. And so rather than launching in markets where it's like highly contested, you're going to have to compete with every single tech giant in the world. I honestly think there's huge markets in some of these developing countries for a lower price end up headset, maybe with slightly lower resolution, but something that basically can plug into a lot of different devices. And I think some of the display manufacturers, if they really do their market analysis, they could just basically capture entire markets before they even come into creation with stuff. But that's something where you don't get as much press about that up front in the ways that the CEOs can brag about at first. But 4 or 5 years out, I mean, yeah, I'm expecting some group to figure this stuff out, so it'll be fascinating to watch.
Okay, next up, from CNET, David Lum says AT&T and Verizon agree to delay the launch of their upgraded 5G networks for 2 weeks over aviation safety concerns from the FAA and the airline industry. And we've been following this story now for, a couple months. And there's just some cautious concern that 5G antennas are going to cause havoc with airplanes if they are too close to the airfield during takeoffs and landings. More obviously, they're more concerned about the takeoffs. But and the FAA was flexing and saying to AT&T and Verizon, you need to chill out on deploying these 5G antennas near airports. And AT&T and Verizon said, well, what if we just run them at a lesser intensity? And now the headline is that AT&T and Verizon agreed to delay the launch of their upgraded 5G networks for 2 weeks. The companies were
And Tyler, it's specific to Verizon and AT&T because they're using something called the C-band spectrum, and T-Mobile isn't. So there's no issue with T-Mobile. It's just these two companies, according to the federal government. Yeah.
exactly right. And for those who might be confused, that was Ken speaking in Clubhouse. And we have a lot of friends, over 300 plus friends in Clubhouse, and maybe a third of that in Twitter. And we're on both apps simultaneously. You can raise your hand to speak on either stage, and people in both apps will hear everyone regardless of which app you're speaking in. That's kind of the beauty of.
Hey, Tyler, you got this humming. I'm on both and it's working. I mean, there's a slight. Katie and I were just chatting. Katie's on the stage here in
Twitter.
Twitter, yeah. And she was trying to get this done, and I said, "You got Tyler with all the equipment there. He's got this happening." So it's actually I'm on both stages, and it's working.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah, me too. I'm in both, and by the way, I'm not using any hardware. I'm using a phone for Twitter Space. I'm using my laptop for Clubhouse. There's no cables between them. I just put the two devices.
Oh no! Wow.
Yeah, I put the two devices next to each other, and they hear each other automatically. So there you go.
Okay, big plug for Karma Club. We've been doing this for months. We are at 11 o'clock Mountain Time every Thursday on Twitter Spaces, Call In, and Clubhouse, and we are discussing differences between women and men this Thursday in leadership positions. So it should be very spicy. So I want both men and women to come and support.
Okay. That was
Tyler's like, why did we let her talk?
No, you always have an open invite on my stages, Francine. So, I'm enjoying your photos, by the way, from London. Are you done with your London trip at the moment, or?
I'm flying home tomorrow.
Yeah, but I've been loving the photos there.
Oh, thank you. So a lot of Clubhouse people in person.
Oh, there's a lot of tech newsers based in London. Cal's right there in Oxford, for example, but the Professor Osif and Ben, and there's tons all up in the London area. So the next article is from the Korea Times. South Korea's ruling party announced an NFT presidential election fundraiser. One of the party's presidential nominees supports NFTs in gaming. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea, the DPK, is set to become the world's first political party to issue non-fungible tokens as a way to do campaign fundraising. Kind of a fantastic concept. I myself have a concept, which is we could make a DAO to raise funds, and it might even involve NFTs in some way, to raise enough money to persuade a particular presidential candidate from not running. And if we were to reach a certain amount, say $1 billion, perhaps they would take it and resign from the race, for example. And I imagine there's enough billionaires who might, and if it doesn't work, then the money would be refunded ostensibly. And so I'm anticipating a lot of really interesting DAO and NFT uses around political fundraising.
I'm
Tyler,
just laughing
um,
that you missed the
oh,
opportunity to do the Doctor Evil $1 billion, but you know.
Yes.
Um, Tyler, I I don't know if that's illegal, because I think there was a big issue. The last election season, I think, during the presidential election, there was a Florida local election, and the Republicans actually went out and got a candidate for fake so that he can take votes from the Democrats, so that the vote would be diluted and he would lose to the Republican. And now I think they were investigating that, because the candidate turned out to be a fake one who got paid money to just fakely run, but not for real. And yeah, I was reading some article that was during the presidential election in 2020, and then they said that was illegal, and they were trying to investigate that. How's that different from what you were trying to do? Is that like
But this wouldn't be
uh,
a fake candidate, for one thing.
okay, just only fund or ask someone to drop out?
Yes, where it's essentially it's not presidential campaign financing. It's not somebody. They would only receive the money if they no longer were a presidential candidate. So we're not fundraising for a presidential candidate. We're doing the opposite. We're fundraising somebody who specifically isn't and no longer is a political candidate.
Yes, paying you to
And
not
that's a,
go
that's
to
a nice
polls.
precedent that you're going to set there.
Pay people to not run for president.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think even though it was during the presidential election, but in parallel there was some local election in Florida, so that's what it happened. They recruited just some layman person to dilute the election,
Yeah.
the vote
I
from someone
actually
else.
I actually tried to do this when a particular person was running for president back in 2016, and using Stripe. I had several calls with Stripe leadership and in the development details of how to do it. And the problem we kept facing was that Stripe could only hold the funds for 21 days, which was not enough. We needed the funds to be held for many months, and so it ended up falling apart. But anyway, now we're in a whole new world just 4 short years later. So by the way, back to the main story, the South Korean ruling party doing this is worth noting that Korea is also the first country to go big into the metaverse officially, from like an official government, you know, public announcement perspective. I mean, maybe other governments are dabbling in it, but it's, as far as we know, the first country to actually make a formal headline out of it was Korea. Yes, Cheryl?
But Tyler, for this political election, right, wouldn't this create a potential trouble of foreign influence?
You'd have to be more specific to what you're referring to.
Well, in many countries, they do not allow foreign influence on their local politics, right? So if
Oh,
South Korea is to do a NFT version of this
uh
fundraising,
huh.
will they, for example,
Right. So could it be? Can people from outside Korea participate? That's a great question. I don't.
yep.
I don't know. And does Korea allow that or not? I don't know. It's a good question. I imagine that if they don't allow foreign funds, then they're going to limit it to only be usable by people in Korea, perhaps. Next article. Google acquires Israeli startup, which provides, you guessed it, cybersecurity. As Israel is a bit of a one-trick pony with their startups over there, but they are the fastest pony in cybersecurity globally, and it's not a surprise to see Google acquiring a cybersecurity startup from Israel. Google acquires a lot of startups from Israel, and a lot of startups from Israel are cybersecurity companies, and that's still a great base.
What type of cybersecurity? Is it defense or offense?
It says orchestration service. The source says it's $500 million, and the Israeli company will form the basis for Google's cyber operations in Israel and will be part of the tech giant's cloud activity. Uh,
Okay, cloud cyber. Yeah, that's gonna be super big within like the next 6 to 9 months. I've been in some cybersecurity Twitter spaces, and it's only gonna grow. And e-commerce, but obviously you knew that. But cybersecurity specifically, cloud services as well. It's about to boom, and they're looking for people. They're literally hunting like anyone who wants to get a tech job should like just look into cybersecurity. They said basically most things can be taught on job. You just need to know what you're doing in tech, basically.
mm-hmm. Okay, and
Hey,
now
hey, do I see Michael down there? Hey,
do
Michael,
you? Do
did you
you?
just join?
Do you?
Yo, it's
Happy New
so
Year,
funny
everyone.
when Cal
Michael.
calls people out. It's funny.
No, no, no,
Well,
no. Michael's
Happiest
like,
of New Years.
Happy New Year.
Michael
Happy
is
New
not.
Year,
Happy
Michael's
New
not
Michael.
Year.
here.
Happy New Year,
Oh man,
Cal.
Happy
Happy
New
New Year,
Year! I haven't
Michael.
talked to you.
Happy
Talked
New
to you.
Year.
Hey,
Happy New Year,
so
everyone.
nice to see you.
Yeah, we're getting the old
I mean,
gang
it was a
back.
couple days ago, but as black people, I had to be a little
Totally.
bit late.
We have
Oh, geez.
what's up, Michael?
Ouch.
Or maybe right on time, Michael.
Michael's waking up from his New Year's party.
Color people
Well,
time, color people time.
no, it could be in. They're just having it now in Wakanda, by the way. So you're right on time. So
Yeah.
There you go. Just in time for Three Kings Day.
Yes, ma'am.
good to have Cal and Michael both back in the same tech news room. So um, let's jump into the tweets. Although there's one more kind of popular headline before we jump into the tweets from our friend Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg. You will recall him as the guy who was surprised to find out there were strings attached to getting the mail-in rebate for his iPhone. And he says in 2022, Apple will likely finish ditching Intel by the time that the Worldwide Developer Conference comes around, which is usually June-ish, late spring. The biggest MacBook Air redesign in history. You got my attention. My ears are percolating, are burning, Mark. And launch the iPhone 14 with a hole punch-sized notch, which that would be great, and it would bring it up to the standard of the Samsungs and the Xiaomi's and whatnot. So it's just a pinhole sized notch at the top of the phone. That would be lovely. I hope he's right. So now we get into the
Apple
tweets.
sorry, did they say anything about it being interoperable? Because I know that was a big thing for Apple last year, especially in Europe, like having to submit to regulations for
Hmm.
phone ports and stuff.
Hmm. Oh, you're right. That's a great one, Daimler. And you being in Europe, obviously, that's a front of mind for you. So what's happening for those who don't recall? We had the headline that was about 2 months ago, was it not, Daimler? That the
Yeah, it was.
the EU is going to push Apple to no longer do lightning cables on phones in the EU. That they're going to force them to do USB-C instead of lightning cables in the EU. To be continued. They have yet to make a final decision on that, but it seems like they really want to do that. So, thank you for bearing with us through the boring big headlines today. Now we get into the tweets that we've all been waiting for, like this one from our friend Vinay. Vinay, you want to share the drone story?
Oh yeah. So my favorite topic: drone attack on an Iraqi military base that houses U.S. troops, and two drones were shot down. Drones are making a name right in the start of the year. They almost got through. So the Iraqi forces and the American forces shot two drones entering the civilian section of a military base at Baghdad airport. So it's really getting really interesting that it's not just in India where drones are being used, but now in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah.
So,
And the story from Reuters says that both of these drones were armed, So the two armed drones were shot down on Monday as they approached an Iraqi military base hosting U.S. forces near Baghdad's international airport. The attack came as Iran and its allies in Iraq marked the second anniversary of the assassination of top Iranian general Soleimani. And commenting on the attack, an official of the U.S. led international military coalition said the base's defense system has engaged, quote, two fixed wing suicidal drones. They were shot down without incidents. This was a dangerous attack on a civilian airport, the coalition official said in a brief statement. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. Armed groups that some Iraqi officials say are backed by Iran have claimed responsibility for similar attacks in the past. So ostensibly it might be from Iran. Footage provided by the coalition official showed that the official said was debris of the two fixed-wing drones deployed in the attack, with writing clearly visible on the wing of one drone reading Soleimani's revenge. Okay, well, that makes it a real puzzle.
Yeah,
So,
and there was an interesting article in India a few weeks ago that the Indian intelligence forces agencies found a drone training school for terrorists in Pakistan, which only specializes on training drone pilots. So that's a new type
I
of.
can't lie, that's a real big deal, and I only know this now because I want a drone and the RC drone, obviously not one of these drones, and I thought the headline was weird, but then I realized that a lot of these automated robots, automatons, or whatever, are going to be used for things like this now, and it's very like they want people that are very skilled in it, like. I checked in my area because my friend told me you are not allowed a drone over 250 grams or kilograms. Grams, sorry, not kilograms. And it's a big deal if you actually do have one because you're either a hobbyist or a professional, and there's no intermediate. And basically, it changes, like the whole game changes after your drone is over 250 grams, especially if you're building one yourself or you have a camera on the drone as well. So being having drones and having drone schools and all of these things, it's going to be a bigger deal, especially with what we said with even what was happening with Tesla, because that also came into play with Tesla needing to be all seeing and all hearing, and Elon Musk even talking about wanting to have sounds on Tesla cars as well. So having these things in war type areas, I don't know what to call them, but just very testy political situations is uh it's on the edge, but we're basically here now, and it's
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. I'm going to make a prediction that 2022 is going to be the year of drone identification numbers, like VIN numbers, for all the bigger over not the non-hobby drones, and also official drone pilot licenses. That's going to have to be the only way that they're going to be able to track stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to be a hobbyist right now and not trying to have a pro drone license. So I have to be in a field where there's no houses quite far away from me, and I'm not allowed to look into houses or do any of those other things. So there's a lot of regulations in the UK already for RC pilots, and that is basically going into these this drone speciality because basically drones are lighter and smaller than RC helicopters as well. So there's a lot of difference, but at the same time, it's quite a lot of stuff with drones is illegal. Basically, that's what I have to say about that.
Yes, so my question is, Tyler or Vinay, what were these drones equipped with? Just the camera or some sort of weaponized
yeah,
system?
it
Uh,
says they were armed, yeah.
armed
Yeah.
with what?
Yeah, and
So
it's
I
quite easy to arm a drone as well. Like the payload doesn't need to be that big because drones can carry pretty much anything with a small battery that charges it. So
yeah. So basically, they can drop explosive devices. That's the most common one, because their payload is an explosive device that is an impact based. So all they need to do is drop it from a certain height into a particular spot, right? So that's it.
Oh,
Okay.
and the international laws don't apply when they cross a border,
Well,
plus the weight
it'll kill
limit, the
people, won't
weight
you?
limit,
So
and hmm?
Oh yeah, we've had Indian troops shooting down plenty of drones that are coming across the border here, dropping weapons, bombs. I mean, Tyler read out an article a few months ago about one of the Indian Army bases was attacked by drones, which came across from the border, but they don't even show up on radar, right? They're so
Yeah,
small.
that was my
yeah, you
next
can
question.
make
That
them
are there
super
any
small.
radars that can sense the drone presence, like the airplane? You know, whenever an aircraft crosses the border, your whatever intelligence system can perceive their presence, but drones are not large enough to be perceived. That means
Yeah.
that's a future,
So I
Yes.
could tell you, I know a company that is working on specific drone radar, small, what do they call, small footprint radar detection.
yeah,
It's called
small
anti-drone
signals or small.
technology.
Yeah, exactly.
What is it?
Anti-drone technology.
Anti-drone technology. I think Turkey and
Yeah.
some other companies already have them.
You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
watch
because I
YouTube
was
videos
looking.
of them shooting drones down with nets right now, and that is basically the most advanced technology that we have for drones. More so getting a radar for something quite light and is basically like a bird. Is yeah, it's gonna be big business, I should say.
Exactly. And also the future of not only detection, but also interception and shooting down, because the regular normal weapon would be very difficult. Like, I'm assuming if I'm shooting a rifle on a duck, like flying far away and very small, it's very difficult as opposed to if I'm using that pellet gun that has multiple different. Um, so, yeah, a new technology needed for detection, perception, and maybe taking down. So new arm race.
It's already
Yeah.
happening. Already happening, Aaron.
Yeah, that with
Mhm.
that alongside cloud based arms race and stuff is yeah, there's a whole new era that we're entering into right now.
Are there technologies to disrupt the
Oops.
signals? Like, because the drone is
Tyler, you
connected
there?
to
Yeah, I'm here. I just muted everybody accidentally. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
calm.
Yeah,
Yes, in
we
Trader
can.
Space, yes.
What was
I
you
mean
saying, Aram?
Clubhouse.
It was
I was asking, is there like
What the heck
a
just happened?
Can you
system that can
speak now?
interrupt
Yeah,
the
I'm
connect?
speaking.
No, they
Oh,
can't hear you on Clubhouse.
hear us.
Oh no. Can they hear each other?
I can hear you.
Okay,
I
now they
can
can
We
hear
hear
can
you.
you.
all hear you.
We can hear you, Tyler, in Clubhouse.
We can
Oh
hear you,
shoot,
Tyler.
something happened to my audio settings in Clubhouse all of a sudden. That's
No, we can
strange.
hear you in
No,
Clubhouse.
we
We
Sorry
can
can
about
hear
that.
you.
hear
But
I
you,
can hear
Vinay,
you.
Tyler.
I sound okay in Clubhouse now?
Yes, you do.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yep. Well, he's
Okay.
gone quiet again.
Hear us in Twitter then.
Okay. So we'll jump into the next article. The next big one is that just happened basically in the past 24 hours. Tomoko and others in the room shared this one. I have the version from NPR, although a lot of people are covering this, about former Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes is found guilty on 4 counts in related to fraud. Holmes, who was once seen as one of the most promising leaders in Silicon Valley, could spend up to 20 years in prison for lying to investors and patients, although it was
She
four
didn't
of
get
the
convicted of the patient
counts, and there
counts.
were several others that she was not found guilty in. And the 4 counts that she was found guilty in, 3 of those were counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud for lying to investors about devices developed by Theranos. The jury found Holmes not guilty of 4 other fraud related charges connected to allegations that she duped patients who received false or faulty results from tests conducted by Theranos, which collapsed in 2018. The jury could not reach a unanimous verdict on 3 other counts tied to investor fraud. The U.S. District Judge for Northern District of California in San Jose, Edward Davila, is expected to declare a mistrial for those 3 counts. It is unclear whether prosecutors intend to indict her again for those charges and possibly allowed a possibility which is allowed under federal law. Quote, the guilty verdicts in the case reflect Mrs. Holmes' culpability in this large-scale investor fraud, and she must now face sentencing for her crimes, says U.S. Attorney Stephanie Hines in a statement. Holmes's sentencing date has not been set yet, but she faces a maximum penalty of 20 years behind bars. Though legal experts say she will likely be sentenced to a lesser punishment. When the verdict was read, the court was eerily quiet. Holmes, who sat masked in the courthouse, had no visible reaction. She later hugged members of her family in the front row of the court one by one. Holmes, who was 37 years old, walked out of the courtroom clasping the hands of family members and stared straight ahead with laser-like focus as a phalanx of cameras flashed around her.
Tyler,
Yes,
It's
this
sir.
is
20
Robert
years
Hey,
for
over
Robert.
in
each
NorCal.
count,
Good to
Hey,
hear
Tyler.
you.
buddy. What surprises me about this is mostly the duping of the customers, those who were getting information on the data from the systems. That just blows my mind, and I wonder the implications of a civil suit for those people, especially since a criminal one didn't go through. What kind of chances they have in a criminal suit? Number two, being in the industry that actually had a number of my former clients buy into this bullshit that she had, I still remain miffed by how silent my industry is, even though a couple of people actually ended up testifying as why these major corporations aren't suing her, the board of directors, and the rest of the people. It just blows my mind. And how she was able to get that board just blows my mind too.
Well, can
Yeah,
I answer
thanks.
some of your questions? By the way, they're probably not suing, her and her
Is
company
anyone
because
on my audio got screwed up?
you,
I touched a
you
button on my
can't get
laptop
water
that
out of a rock.
severely screwed everything up. Can somebody on Clubhouse speak so I can test my
Yeah,
audio
I'm
Yes,
settings?
speaking.
Tyler. This is
Yes.
a check.
We're
We
speaking
are
So
of the
speaking.
I
board
Speak.
meeting
maybe
that
shoot.
happened.
I don't know what the
So
heck
what,
happened
what
here.
I
Hold
was
on.
going to say is that you can't get water out of a rock. So if we're not going to sue the company,
I'm
Ken,
gonna have
I
to
don't
jump
think you
out of
can
the room
hear
and come
us.
right back in.
Can you
Let's
hear
hope that
Tyler?
solves it.
It's okay. This is the real
Hear me? Can
conversation
you hear
here.
The folks
Tyler
in
in
Clubhouse
Clubhouse?
can feel free to
This